But outside of horn, yeah, it was really important to just step back and go, okay, what is my identity if I'm not a horn player? Because this is the first time that reality of your identity being ripped away from you was a thing. It's like, what would I do if I'm not going to play horn? And I didn't know if I was going to come back. The body is really good at neighbours stepping in to help out neighbours. So if one muscle is working super hard, another muscle will try to step in and if a muscle is not working hard, like the neighbour will step in and overwork to try and help that muscle. So that's where imbalance is often an issue. I had that confidence, so that made me still feel like I was a musician and that I could work on phrasing and sound concepts and stuff. Even though I was playing at a high level, and I was told by a couple of teachers that, yeah, you'll get to a certain level, but there'll be a ceiling on it. Like the way that you play is like just not super efficient, but you will get to a high level.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today I've got a really exciting guest who graciously is up quite early in the morning. He hails from Perth, Australia. Right now for me in Utah, it is currently 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday. Frankie, what time is it there right now?
It's 7 a.m., but I've got a 3.5-year-old, so this time is not foreign to me. So good morning.
7 a.m. on Sunday, yeah. So
Sunday, yeah.
Very, very grateful for him and his time. So Frankie Surdo, he is a French horn player in the Western Australian Symphony Orchestra, and has also done a lot of research and collaboration with medical professionals in the area of embouchure and the physiology regarding brass playing. And so I was really excited to have him on to share his experience with injury and also the things he's been able to do because of it. So welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be really great. We were talking about some stuff before we hit record, and about some of your own projects that are going on that are really exciting. So we'll get to that in a second. But I'd like to start out just by kind of you having my guests share their experience with injury, kind of how they got into this world of injury recovery and what they're doing with it. And so if you would like to just kind of share your story of your own experience with injury.
Yeah. So I had an overuse injury 12 years ago now, so 2011, 12-ish. I was freelancing, and freelancing things were going kind of as good as they could be. I was getting a lot of work around the place. I just won my first job with the Western Australian Symphony Orchestra. And 2 weeks after my trial period or probation period finished, all of a sudden my playing went, the only words I can use is it went funny. My pitch dropped. Suddenly a couple of middle register notes just weren't working properly. It just wouldn't speak, or I couldn't play loud, soft. They were hard work. And then that spread from the middle register out, and it got to a point over 2 weeks, it deteriorated to the point that I couldn't really hold a note anywhere on the horn. Yeah, I joked to people that weren't horn players, like, you could play horn better than me at the moment, and it was true. And so there were some concerts where I was just left miming. Like the last concert I did, I was literally just miming most of it. And it gets to the point, like, you notice things, and then maybe the people sitting next to you or around you notice things, and then everyone notices. But luckily I pulled the pin before that. So, I mean, luckily for me, I had passed my probation period and I was well supported. So I told the orchestra I need to take time off. Something's going on. So for me at the time, there was no pain. For some people, there's pain. There was no pain, but
interesting.
Yeah, it was just like everything had just let go, and I couldn't hold notes without it. The pitch shaking, not the muscle shaking, but the pitch shaking. Couldn't play high, couldn't play low. it was a struggle. So from that point, I mean, who do you call? Yeah, it's hard to know who to call. Luckily in Australia, there's an amazing doctor by the name of Dr. Bronwen Ackermann. She's a lecturer in anatomy at the University of Sydney. And she has spent the last 25 years kind of dedicating a lot of her life to research into musicians' injuries. So not just brass players, but wind players, string players, piano players, guitar players. And she's one of the world leading experts in this field, without a doubt. She's not a musician herself.
Oh,
but she,
I did not know that.
She's never been a musician. She started in a lot of sports rehab and stuff like that. And then a couple of musicians started coming to her, and then she realized that she went on tour with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra and realized, oh my gosh, these musicians know nothing about injury prevention or just basic anatomy. And she's like, there's something in this. So back to my injury, I rang her and said, like, look, this is going on. I'm going to come and see you. And she's in Sydney. So I booked a one-way ticket to Sydney, and caught up with her. And her first questions for me, I guess my first questions for her were like, all right, I just need to get playing again. Couple of weeks, hopefully. Like, she's like, no. Like, this is a longer-term thing. We need to kind of see what's going on. Yeah. How do you breathe? I was like, oh, the problem's up here. Like, surely I know how to breathe. And even just talking to her about the anatomy of breathing and the timing of breathing became quite evident quite quickly that I knew close to nothing about what I was actually doing. So for the first probably 2-3 months of my rehabilitation, I didn't actually play a single note on the horn. We worked a lot on timing and how to feel, what's meant to happen when you're breathing and supporting, and the timing of that. And at the same time, we were doing isometric exercises in the face to target the muscles that we use in brass playing to strengthen them again. So with an overuse injury, the muscles are so overused that they just kind of let go and go weak. And so to build them up again, it's actually more beneficial to do some off the instrument exercises to kind of strengthen them again, to give them confidence, and then reintroduce kind of how you form an embouchure again. I completely lost the muscle memory of how to form an embouchure, how to play a note. So we built it up from scratch. But then 6 months later, I was back in the orchestra, and they phased me in. So I was playing half programs to start with. And the first couple were really scary. I didn't feel like I was ready to come back. I still had to have a little mirror on my stand to line everything up. Because if you gave me 2 minutes, I was able to kind of set something up, put the instrument up, and be like, okay, now I can play a note. But for a conductor to be like 3, 4, go, it was like my worst nightmare. And a really hard thing to do, just to be able to play straight away when you've been spending months like setting something up. And but yeah, I think that we played Overture to but there was one piece that went really well, and kind of as the confidence came back, it's like, oh, I can do this again. This will be everything will be okay. And things just went better, and I came back a much better player than I ever was, and that's quite common, which is great. And from there, I was kind of back. So 6 months later, and then that's definitely the physical side of it, but the mental side was really tough. And at the very beginning, I went to a psychologist just to say, like, look, this is happening. I'm going to need help through this, because this is my identity as a musician, and this has been ripped away from me. And I think that's really important. That was really important for me. And yeah, I guess that's my story. So it's important to reiterate that I had an overuse injury and not focal dystonia or something. So it was very much a physical thing, and it is possible to rehabilitate from an injury. Yeah, which I guess we're learning more and more these days, and that's why you're doing what.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's so true. It's just the mental side of things, I mean, I'm a college student. I'm not qualified to necessarily give like psychiatric help or anything like that, but the extensive community that comes from that mental journey that everyone goes through injury is the reason, definitely why I'm doing this. But I really think there's a couple of things that you mentioned in there that I thought were really interesting that I want to hit on. First of all, I'm curious, when you said you had an overuse injury with no pain, I've never heard that before, because I thought, in my mind, I'm still learning about these things, is overuse injuries usually result in pain. And so was it just like a muscle failure, or kind of what was it diagnosed as, other than just like an overuse injury?
Overuse.
Or the cause of it, I guess.
Yeah, not all overuse injuries have pain as a symptom. And that's, I mean, that's quite a common thing to not have pain. It was definitely diagnosed by Dr. Bronwen Ackermann as an overuse injury. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's just really cool for me to find out. So I also wanted to talk about, kind of as a principle, your orchestra, when you came back, you said that they phased you in, right? And so I'm just kind of curious on what that conversation was like with your personnel manager or whoever you had to talk to, when you were starting to come back, like, hey, I can actually start to play. Like, what was their kind of viewpoint and their perspective that they share with you? And just like, how was that interaction with them when you started to come back?
Yeah. I guess there's two things in this. There's the conversation with your colleagues, so the musicians, and then the conversation that you have with management.
Sure.
I'm in a section and an orchestra that's really supportive, has a really good culture, and my principal was, his only words were, take as much time as you need off. Do this properly. So that just to have that is really good, because I know that that's not the case for everybody. People like, you need to sort this out, or treat you as a basket case. But to have that, know that I have, really important. The conversation with management. So in Australia, they call it workers' compensation, but in America, they might call it insurance. So when you're part of an organization, there is a health insurance aspect to what you do, or in the workplace, if a piece of wood falls on your head and you get knocked out, you go through a process of where your income is insured, and you're able to get be paid, as well as get all of the help that you need in this process. But part of this is, for insurance companies, all they see is like, okay, there's been an injury, you're getting treatment, and then they really want to know what your return to work program is, or how you're coming back. And so usually in orchestras, what will happen is, when you're getting to a point where you're able to play again, or you're feeling really confident about your playing, you could either come back for just one piece, or you could commit to doing just one piece per program, or one half of the per program, and you dip your feet in and see how things are feeling, and then phase back in to work. So as much as it is like a confidence building thing to get back to that intensity that we have to do performing full programs every week, it's also keeping insurance companies happy that you're progressing back to work and they don't have to pay for your treatment anymore. Which is fair, but I think it's probably more of that they just want to know that things are happening.
Are working properly. Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah, I was just curious because it seemed like, I mean, just from at face value, that it seemed like they were just generally, like they weren't and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but they weren't putting pressure on you to like,
No.
you have to come back by this day or anything like that. But it was like, you come back as you need or as you're able, right?
Yeah. And like, it's not always the case. Some organizations, for some people, some clients that we've had, it is like, okay, well, when are you going to come back? And they will give a hard date. It's like, okay, you'll come back in the summer, or you'll come back at this date. And that's worse, because you kind of got this ticking time bomb in your head, and rather than what you feel comfortable with. So every orchestra is different, I would say, and every section's different. Every player is different. It's such a unique, such a personal journey. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. I really think that that's something that a lot of people need to hear, a lot of my listeners, because I always talk about the timeline, the toxicity of the timeline, you know?
Yeah.
That should be on a t-shirt, or maybe it shouldn't. I don't know. But it's that artificial, like, oh, I have to be, be at this point by this time, or else, it's all going to crap or anything or something like that. And it's when we are able to have that support system, that external support system, that I really feel like that's when a lot of the mental anguish, right, can go away or can be alleviated, right, when we take that timeline away, and also the people around us are being supportive, and there's really the only expectation that they should have really is like that you need to do what you need to do in order to get better, right? So
yes.
It's
and then
so
conversely, there are some, I think things go wrong when you try too many avenues of help. And so what people don't want to see, and what I've seen quite a lot as well, is where a musician will kind of try get help from this person or this source or 5 sources at the same time, and things just drag on. I strongly believe in committing to 1, maybe 2 avenues of help and really committing to it, because sometimes when you spread across too many things, it's just too much going on. But emotionally, physically, you just can't see progress, feel progress. You'll often get clashing views about the same thing, and so it's
you can't be walking on 5 different paths at the same time. You don't have enough feet for that. I can definitely attest to that. I've learned that the hard way in some respects, but also been given that guidance by a lot of people. It's just like, just stick to the path that you're on, and you'll know if it's not working out for you. You really will, I think.
But I'll just say one thing, like, it's like my situation, I'm very, very lucky in my situation, but if I was a freelancer, it's a completely different situation. You don't have that backing, that support. You don't want to have to tell your employers, your teacher, the principal of the orchestra that you're playing with, or you don't want to have to tell them, like, hey, I'm struggling, like, I'm going through this. Like, and a lot of people that have dealt with are having to go through this. It's like, oh, can I just do one more program and just get through it to pay the bills for next week and stuff? And I totally accept that I'm the minority in this kind of situation, and that the majority of people are having to do this while they're freelancing, or having to navigate this, and it's really hard, like mentally, financially.
It's true. I've had a couple of freelancers on the job, or I'm sorry, on the job, talking about when they're on the job and something goes wrong. And they're just like, I had to figure something out until I couldn't do it anymore, And you hear some of these stories where it's just like, why would you put yourself through that? But it's that external pressure, right? That we were just talking about that causes that, I guess, the overuse to become into something really, really unhealthy. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, I love just hearing about this part of everyone's story. partially because I'm still in that part of my journey, but I feel like there's a lot of people in it. But I'm just curious on like that down. You said it was about what, 6 months from the time of your injury to when you started coming back, or is it a little bit longer?
No, 6 months. Yeah.
6 months. So during that time when you weren't playing and, didn't have your normal activities, what did you do to keep yourself busy, but also, to keep yourself in the music, right? Keep yourself connected to what you love, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was told so my psychologist gave me some strategies, to stay inspired. So I listened to a lot of music. Also, I had, she told me to print out a lot of my heroes. So a lot of like teachers or horn heroes or something. I had them on my wall printed just to kind of look at and just to remind myself of who I want to be. And I also, so what's quite common is that even though I couldn't play French horn, I could actually play trombone, okay, because it uses the same muscles but in different loads. So the muscles that you use for trombone are the same muscles but just in a different. You're able to kind of trick the brain that actually like you can play trombone, and that's quite common. And that you might be able to play if you're a trumpet player, you could probably play tuba, okay, without the same symptoms. I feel like I mastered the C major scale on the trombone, and just to play a scale, but as musically as you can, and to work on breathing and sound and stuff, and not have the brain interrupting when you bring the horn up. Yeah, there's so many things going on, but for trombone, because it's a little bit more foreign, I had that confidence. So that made me still feel like I was a musician and that I could work on phrasing and sound concepts and stuff. But outside of horn, it was really important to just step back and go, okay, what is my identity if I'm not a horn player? Because this is the first time that reality of your identity being ripped away from you was a thing. It's like, what would I do if I'm not going to play a horn? And I didn't know if I was going to come back. The only other thing that I really enjoyed was drinking coffee, and mucked around a little bit with roasting coffee in a bread machine with a heat gun pointed in. You can kind of do these Frankenstein ways of roasting coffee. So I went down to a coffee roastery once or twice a week and learned how to roast coffee commercially, and actually ended up like starting my own coffee roasting business, and bought a coffee roaster and was doing it out of my backyard and roasting 50, 60 kilos of coffee a week.
Wow.
And that kind of kept me, like there was something else that I could really sink a lot of my time into while I was going through this rehabilitation. So that's kind of what I did during that time to get through. I went to a lot of concerts. I kept in contact, going to concerts and still hanging out with the musicians and feeling like I was still a part of that. I think the worst thing to do is to kind of disappear off the face of the earth.
Isolate.
I was very open about it. Everybody knew what I was going through, and I just made sure that I was still in contact with my colleagues. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think there's a couple of things in there that I want to just point out, just as principles, because first of all, I think it's kind of funny. I have a buddy from high school that I would play in festival bands, and now he's a professional coffee roaster.
Yeah, right.
You'll figure. There's a connection to brass playing and coffee.
Perfectionism.
Right. There you go. I think he's really into like I'm not really a coffee drinker, but when people like make almost like art with the milk on top of the
latte art.
Yeah. He's really into that. But so anyway, the things, just you have to find something that's outside of music. I think we learn that, especially true. I mean, that should be the thing for everybody, that's a musician. You need to have something outside of music that's like a hobby or a business, just like a side hustle, if you will, just to kind of keep a more, what's the word, like a life balance. But you have to have something that you can find enjoyment in, and then also the community, the importance of community, in recovery, because even though they may not be able to relate to you necessarily in the same regard, or in the way that you might want, but just you're keeping that connection, right? It really is the most dangerous thing to lose, I think, in injury recovery, because the moment you lose that, whether by your choice or by someone else's, you really could lose the passion, or the, not necessarily the passion for it, but the I guess your connection to the music. I think that was one of the things I learned the strongest in, or it was the strongest lessons that I learned in COVID, was once we started playing again with other people. It was just like, oh yeah, this is why I do it, or one of the reasons why I do it is the camaraderie that you have, right? So it's all important stuff. So talking about overuse injuries, just kind of shifting gears here. That's kind of how mine was classified by my doctor. It was a muscular tear, actually, of sorts. But it was, caused by overuse, right? Overplaying and poor technique. So what kind of separates, especially for brass players, what kind of separates overuse injuries from other sorts of injuries, as far as, from a psychological standpoint, from a physical standpoint? Like, obviously there's a big difference between like you getting punched in the face and hurting your lip versus you overplaying, right? But kind of like, what sets the overuse injuries apart from any other sort of injury that a brass player might go through, as far as a recovery standpoint and things like that?
So there's lots of, an overuse injury can kind of umbrella a lot of different, so you can have like a sprain, or just, it's like an over fatiguing of the muscle, or like you said, like if you're overusing the muscle, or if you're like digging into a muscle and like you might have had your tear, or like bruising of a muscle. There's lots of different causes that will end up as an overuse injury. And then from what we know now is that, an overuse injury, if not treated, like can turn into focal dystonia. Not in every case, but there can be a connection with the two. And what else will I say? Yeah, so like from either bad technique, whether it like you're like using one muscle, one side of your face more than the other, and you're overworking one side of the face, so they're going to get overuse, and not the other side. The body is really good at neighbors stepping in to help out neighbors. So if one muscle is working super hard, another muscle will try to step in and if a muscle is not working hard, like the neighbor will step in and overwork to try and help that muscle. So that's where imbalance is often an issue. So let's say if you're really like one side is very weak and the other side is super strong, like your body can put up with that for a while. Sometimes it can be a long while, but at some point that rubber band will snap. And not in all cases, but for some people more so than others. And then, so that's where overuse usually happens, when one muscle is working way harder than it should be, and usually because of an imbalance. So it's like, I wear glasses. One eye is strong and one eye is weak. So one eye has been working really hard to make me able to see, whereas one eye is weak, so it's kind of just letting go. So that's why my eyes were getting worse, and then I got glasses to correct it. So that's why we often have different, like your left eye and your right eye might have different strengths in in
Right.
when you buy glasses. Yeah, so the body is really good at kind of doing this, unfortunately. But I think like the biggest thing that we talk about a little bit in brass pedagogy is support and air pressure and stuff like that. But teachers usually just talk about, you need to support more, you need support, you need to use more air, but we haven't really been taught how to do that physically, what happens anatomically, how to feel it, and the timing of that and what happens. So singers are really good at this, because that's all they've got. They talk about this a lot.
Right.
They're kind of light years ahead of brass players. So even though teachers say the right things, so if I told you to support more, what would you actually do? It's a vague kind of instruction that can mean something very different for different people. And if you don't know what you're meant to be doing, you'll end up just kind of crunching something or going, I guess that's supporting, but we're not actually taught as brass players, okay, where does support come from? It comes from the pelvic floor. How do you access that? At what point do you support? Do you just whack it on when you start playing? Do you do it before you start playing? So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned in terms of moving forward, but maybe I'm getting off topic, but
No, I think that's a great place to go next is your work in learning about the physiology of I guess preventative measures through pedagogy. That sounds really weird coming out of my mouth, but just the correct way to play, right, that prevents overuse. I've got educators that listen to my show, and so my goal is that they learn about this as well as is like when we talk. I mean, that's you hit the nail on the head. Actually, is like the cliches, I guess, that we have in brass pedagogy, like support more air or whatever. Those can be really damaging if they aren't founded on the actual principles of brass playing and the physiology behind it. And so, I don't know kind of where to start with that, but like with the physiology of playing, well, let's just start with, you touched on support more. Like when people say that, what do you think are they actually trying to get at? And then what's actually going on when you are correctly supporting more?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So, yeah. So, I mean, especially for trumpet, it's all about air pressure. We're trying to create more air pressure. It's not like you need to dump more air through. It's what you do with that air. It's how is that air traveling, and usually it's when a teacher is saying support more, or for the sound, or for going to the high register or low register, it's about air pressure, and so we're creating greater air pressure with our bodies. So support ultimately comes from the pelvic floor. So if you imagine our lungs are as high as our collarbone and go down to the bottom of our rib, they sit. Then you have the diaphragm below the lungs. So the lungs are inside the rib cage, then the diaphragm, and then below is all of our guts. And then below those guts. So this is kind of like, breathing 101 in 2 minutes. But
Sure.
your lungs fill with air, your ribs expand, your diaphragm drops, pulling the lungs down, and that's pushing down on your guts. So like when you lie down, your guts come up if you breathe in and out. Your guts are coming down, which is pushing down on the pelvic floor. And so it's by engaging the pelvic floor that pushes back up on the guts, which pushes back up on the diaphragm, which pushes back up on the lungs, and then the ribs coming in. That's what creates air pressure. And then also your oblique muscles come in, and then your abdominal muscles are used just for helping articulation and stuff, but they're not something that we want to use. So there's two different things going on. There's the inhalation and what has to happen to get as much air in as quickly as we can. So that comes from using your guts to help the diaphragm drop really quickly and expanding your rib cage. And then the exhalation, so pelvic floor again, ribs, oblique muscles. Yeah.
Man, I learned a few things in that. That's awesome. And I'll just say real quick before we move on is while I was preparing for this interview, I encountered a clinic that you did. I think it was during the pandemic because it was over Zoom. Maybe it wasn't. If I'm maybe I'm remembering wrong, but anyway, you go into this with some graphics. So if anyone's listening and it's like, I want to see more of this, I'll attach something in the show. I'll attach a link to that presentation in the show notes. It's really informative.
One symposium, I think, Northwest.
Okay.
Northwest symposium. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So all of this stuff comes from. So I had my injury. Called this doctor, and came back to the horn. Great. I was back playing. I was teaching at the universities here, but over the next couple of years, Dr. Bronwen Ackermann would ring me every now and then. Okay, like, look, I've got this client that I'm working with. Can you just have a chat to them? Just to, like, because she's not a musician. She doesn't pretend to be a musician. She's like, look, they're back playing, but I can't give them any musical exercises because I'm not a brass player. It would be wrong of her to do that. So I'd kind of, having been through it, I was able to talk to these musicians and go and converse with them, knowing exactly what they've been through, and give them some ideas. And so from there, that's how kind of I got into this field. But this breathing technique that I talk about in those videos is everything that I learned from Dr. Ackermann, but I've put it into a musical exercise. So a lot of what we do, I'm musicalizing her anatomical teaching of brass playing. So I've tried to make it into a music, like a flow. And I'm not the first person to do something like this, but I think it's really important to break apart what we do and then put it into a timing so that you know exactly what has to happen when. So yeah, that's just a bit of background.
No, it's awesome. I'll attach all that in the show notes, and I think it'll help a lot of people, especially educators. So something also that I've learned in my own journey is that you don't play each brass instrument the same way, and you don't teach it the same way either. And sometimes I feel like there is that some injuries do occur, especially overuse injuries, through poor technique, that is, through these cliches that may work for like a tuba and not for a trumpet or a horn. And so I'm curious, in your research and your interactions with musicians who have gone through injury and with Dr. Ackermann, what kind of things are those? Maybe, I don't know if there's like certain phrases that maybe aren't less helpful for one that are more helpful for another, just to kind of help our educator friends when they're teaching their tuba players versus their trumpet players or horn players versus trombone or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's interesting working with Dr. Ackermann. We help horn players, tuba players, trumpet players, trombone players. And a lot of the time the injuries present the same, like whether it's pain or just things not working, or they've kind of gotten into a bit of a pattern of the yips. Like in golf, they call it the yips, like where there's pause and they just can't articulate. And so, but I would say that the way that it differs. So for trumpet players, it's really about creating an air pressure and being able to form that smaller aperture. And so, even though all the brass instruments have the same muscles, and we use all of the same in playing, we use them at different loads. So the difference between a trumpet compared to horn and trombone, trumpet players really rely, a lot of the load is taken on by your buccinator muscles, which is what we've always referred to as your corners in pedagogy.
Right.
But here it's just the beginning, but these muscles go from here and they go all the way up to the back of the mouth cavity, and then they join to another muscle behind. But a lot of your load is taken there because you don't have to really move too much. You're kind of playing higher and higher. So that this locking of the two goalposts is super important. And then the orbicularis oris takes on a lot of the load. But so trumpet players really need these strong corners planted against their teeth. to support that smaller aperture. But for trombone and horn, we need to play low and high, and so a lot of ours is there's a lot more jaw movement. And while we use those corners, but most of our load is actually taken on by the orbicularis oris, which is our lips. Basically, it's a circular muscle that encompasses both our lips. So that's where most of our load happens, and then tuba as well. So if you meant the reason why that is because the trumpet, your aperture is so much smaller, so you need the support outside the trumpet mouthpiece, so that imbecile can be really strong. But for trombone, horn, tuba, it's a little bit, the aperture is a bit bigger. We need to control it a bit more. We need to go into the low register a bit more. So the injuries will look a little bit different, but usually support is one of the biggest issues for all brass. If that's not there, or if you're not creating air pressure in the right way, it doesn't matter what you do here. And there's no perfect embouchure. I'm not saying that everyone has to have the same embouchure. Everyone's face is completely different, but we all do have the same muscles in our face. And
right.
And activating those muscles will look different for everybody, but there are, if you can think about it, there's general rules that should happen. So like flat chin is a lot of brass players have heard that, but not a lot of brass players have heard that, your top lip needs to be stable as well. And then we talk about corners a lot, but how do you feel that corner? You don't just crunch your corners, but your corner muscles are the only muscles that anchor into the face. So that feeling of them being glued against the teeth, that's how you activate those muscles. And so it's talking about the muscles and kind of how you feel them, or what their role is in the embouchure. Back to your question, what are the different injuries? I guess with trumpet players, it's mostly trying to stop you from using a lot of pressure, and horn as well. Yeah, we need to use some form of pressure, but it's how you use that. It's how you push back on that pressure. So if you can think of the embouchure more like a seal on a high pressure gas pipe, the more high pressure gas that's coming through, the bigger that seal will be. So you might have like a rubber seal with big metal bolts as well. So we need to have a seal. You can't just not use any pressure, but it's what pressure you push back on that. So keeping it off the face, off the teeth. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in my own journey, and please correct me if I'm going in the wrong direction, but it was pretty groundbreaking for me to learn that trumpets did not need the same volume of air, right, as in tuba. And I'm maybe showing my naivete as a student, but that was groundbreaking for me. But that idea had been born from these, pedagogical phrases, I guess, of like use more air or blow harder or things. And so I was curious just with your perspective of some of the traps that we get into with that.
Yeah, and it's all about language, isn't it? It's because use more air. You instantly go to thinking about using more air mass, not air pressure.
Right.
And so you end up just blowing at the thing, overblowing, and trying to figure out ways just to get more air through this thing. But it's not about. But then, you don't want to just. Okay, if it's not about using the same air mass, it's not about just blowing less or breathing in less, because what we know from anatomy is the more that you can fill your lungs, the more that you're actually able to press down on the pelvic floor, the more you're actually able to, the more air pressure you're able to make. So actually filling your body with more is actually a good thing, because you'll be able to support a bit easier. So you don't want to shy away from that, but you don't want to just be blowing all this air. It's how you use that air in a kind of economical way.
Yeah, so true. That was probably the most groundbreaking thing that I learned, is that I didn't need to go through a what felt like a gym workout to play my instrument because I was putting so much dang air through the horn. In fact, I would start like when I would do shows like for like musicals. There was one that it was a jazz show or a musical in the jazz style, and I was literally having to do like yoga stretches to stretch my to loosen my core because I had been trying to compress so much with this really unnecessary volume of air, and then just and then lo and behold, a year later, I'm in my situation that I'm in now. So with an injury, so just really the language we use, like you said, really just plays such an important role. And so talking about that, especially with regarding to overuse injuries, what kind of role do you think? And I don't know what the situation is in Australia from an academic standpoint and the conservatories and also the public schools, but from your experience with working with people and maybe even from your own experience, what role do you think that academia plays in the causation, but also what role can they play in the prevention of overuse injuries in young musicians?
I've been working with Dr. Bronwen Ackermann. We're doing a funded study at the moment about exactly this, what information teachers want and need in teaching anatomy to high school kids. But I think it's almost like there's, what I've encountered from teaching at a tertiary level is you don't get enough time to be able to slow everything down and teach this anatomy properly. So it needs to be part of the syllabus, because you're always, as soon as you get into university, you're always heading toward, okay, when's your next recital? What are you playing? Like almost isn't the room to be able to slow down. It's like, if you want to do it properly, you have to defer that semester because you're not going to play a recital. You want to sort a couple of things out. So, or you end up doing an easier program than you would have liked because you're working on some other stuff. So time is a really tricky thing at a tertiary level. Luckily, like there have been a number of universities that allow doctors to come in and talk to them or have allowed me to come in and just tell my story and talk a little bit about playing and stuff. And same in the States, that there've been been invited to chat to some people. But a lot of the clients we work with are actually teachers, and they've never heard a lot of this stuff before. And so I think definitely like what you're doing, like having podcasts, and I think getting away from reading brass pedagogy or just being taught brass pedagogy that people have learnt from 50, 60 years ago. Yeah, we know so much more now than we used to. And not that those kind of grandfathers and grandmothers of pedagogy were wrong, but like they just didn't have access to the same information we have now. So I think just curiosity is the best thing, like being curious and looking what's out there. And but one really important thing I want to say is that, I'm not a doctor and I'm not pretending to be a doctor, and it's really important that we get information that is backed by research. So the most important thing about what we're doing is that I'm doing this with a doctor, with a lecturer in anatomy, and we do this together. So that there are a lot of musicians out there that are treating overuse injury or brass injuries or focal dystonia that don't have a medical background. And I think I will say that I think that's a little bit wrong. If it's not, it's like you wouldn't go to a doctor and ask for a music lesson, and you wouldn't go to a musician and ask for a medical certificate. I think they really, you need to be able to see a medical professional for something that's innately a medical
condition. Yeah.
So I think if you are seeking help I mean, seeing a neurologist is like one of the must do things you should do, because a lot of doctors, if they see signs of focal dystonia or something, like they might tell you to go get Botox, and while we know that can be a kind of and it can help in short term, but it's not a cure. It can cover up symptoms, but it's not a cure. But if you went to a doctor and they told you to you listen to a doctor, but they're not. It's such a niche thing, that brass injuries, that of course they're not going to be researching what the latest things to do are, or the people to see. They'll just kind of do what they've read in the book and stuff. So yeah, I'm getting off topic again.
No, you're not. It's all amazing stuff. Seriously, it's. I love what you said about the curiosity, because that's something I just feel like has been a huge game changer for me. It was just learning, always learning. I've always felt that, I'm just going to be forthright with it. It's like we teach how we've been taught. And that's, that's how we're expected to teach. I mean, you can't just pull out information out of nowhere, right? But it's, are the people that we're going to for answers actively trying to find more answers themselves, and researching and always learning and things like that. And just the importance of finding credible information, right?
Yeah.
And obviously you go to doctors for that. So, well, this has just been incredible. I really think, especially for the educators that listen to my show, it's going to be a huge game changer for a lot of them, because, like you said, we don't talk about this enough. We don't do the research enough, right? I want to pick your brain about one last thing before we finish up. Because I've always wondered this. I'm a crossover musician. Like, I play in multiple styles, classical, jazz, and all that stuff. Or at least I did before my injury, right? And I will continue. But I'm just curious. You mentioned with the nature and the culture of, like, collegiate, I guess you call it tertiary education. There's not necessarily the time to really dig into the physiology or the anatomy and all that stuff, because we're always focused on the next concert or the next recital or something like that. And so I'm just wondering, because I don't know if I have a good answer for this, and I just love picking people's brains about this, but do you feel like there would need to be, or it's necessary to have almost a cultural overhaul, in maybe not an overhaul, but just a shift from focusing on the next recital, like even like lessening some of the performance requirements in order so that we can become more, I guess, holistically educated musicians and instrumentalists.
Yeah. I don't think this is something I have a big view on or passion, but it's just something that I've observed in my own teaching or being involved with different tertiary educations. The ones that I have been involved with, the first year or two actually don't have public recitals. So there is that room, but it's just something I've wondered. It's like, one big thing is, if someone has a very obvious bad technique, the first thing that people do is like, oh, who was their teacher? And it's kind of unfair, because you think to their teacher, their first teacher was probably coming to their school for like a half an hour, 1 hour lesson a week. Like, that kid wants to play these pieces in the school band, or have to play their end of school. Like, of course, the teacher's not going to be like, oh, we need to rethink your embouchure. Like, tell the school that we need to take 6 months out of school band because we're exploring. Like, I just don't know if there's. So I think, culturally, like, that would just not kind of be. I mean, not in all cases, but I just don't think that would be an obvious thing. But I think the more that people are talking about injuries in musicians, which they are, even 10 years ago, it was less so than what musicians are. I remember when I started telling people I've had an injury, it's only then that people are like, oh yeah, I had something similar, or oh, do you know Thingo? They had something similar. So I think as the more that we're normalizing it, the more that it will be accepted. It's like, oh, cool, they're going through some playing issues. Like, let's give them space. Yeah. Whereas in the past, like that just wouldn't have been a thing. But I think it's more an observation that I just worry that there hasn't been the time for people to really set themselves up for success. Because you imagine when you start learning the trumpet, you're getting lessons so that you can play in the band, and then you're kind of playing. You want to get in the bed of it, and then you're just working towards like an end of school recital to get into the school that you want, and then you get into that school, and then it's all about working towards the next recital or the next audition. Or there is never this COVID time where you've got nothing on the plate, where you can just sit back and sort playing out. And because I think every musician can agree that COVID time is so rare. It's like, wow, like we're not going to be performing. Going to do it. I guess I can work on my playing. Or like COVID time is like the only time in, I guess, our lifetimes, hopefully, that you'll have this space where you just nothing on the horizon. Like, what am I going to do with my playing? And like,
it is what you make of it, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. It's just something I'm observing and just been thinking about. And it's not like I have a strong opinion on like, yes, every school should have this or that. But just more of an observation.
No, and like I said, I don't know if I necessarily have an answer or an opinion necessarily of that either. It's just, I do feel the same way of like it's kind of interesting how we're always focused on the next thing, right? And then I love the phrase COVID time. I'm definitely going to use that later because it's like been a second pandemic for me,
Yeah, totally.
Going through this because but it's just like taking some time to just kind of, or even it could be compared to like a sabbatical, right? Or whatever in the academic world, and just working on yourself and on your playing, and from a playing standpoint, not necessarily from this is the next step in my this is the next expectation I have to fill, I guess you could frame it as. So
yeah,
that's a longer conversation we probably could have for another day. It's all great stuff, and I really have enjoyed our time today. I just have two last questions for you.
Yeah.
So if you could go back to that time in 2011 and you could have the opportunity to take away the fact that you were injured or just leave it there, like, would you take the injury away, or has it been worth it to have gone through this experience?
Oh yeah, totally.
All these years later.
Yeah, totally been worth it, because even though I was playing at a high level, and I was told by a couple of teachers that you'll get to a certain level, but there'll be a ceiling on it. Like the way that you play is like just not super efficient, but you will get to a high level. But he was completely right. This one teacher that said that there was and I always knew that there were kind of things about my playing that were like definitely just, oh, I know that's not quite right, but like maybe that's just the way I play. But then having gone through this injury and then rebuilding from scratch, a lot of those things kind of fix themselves in learning a new efficient way to play, and learning how to support properly, and learning what the roles of the certain muscles in the face do and how to feel them. And while some people might say that's paralysis by analysis, actually like information was king. So I'm able to play, and if something's not going right, I'm able to just scan the body and go, cool, that's not working properly, or that's not doing its job. So I would argue that learning all this information is not paralysis by analysis. I know that some players really don't want to talk about it, but for me, it was so empowering and a really important part of my playing now. And I know that if I relapse, I know exactly how to kind of fix it again, or I just have that confidence knowing that it won't happen again. But yeah, I'm a much better player than I ever was before the injury. So yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, that is another thing, is just paralysis by analysis does not mean that you should be uneducated.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's really just when you let I guess the difference is just when you let that information, well, paralyze you, I guess. When you get, when you aren't able to do anything, or it's not, I guess the distinction is when the information is benefiting you or if it's not, just plain and simple,
Yeah.
So,
but having said that, the process of rehabilitation can feel paralyzing because you're learning so much information and you're trying to piece it all together just to play a goddamn note. But it's about breaking apart the elements and correct repetition, and because you're retraining your body into a new habit and neural pathways, and like retraining a neural pathway, it can take weeks, if not months, to really teach your body to do a new posture, a new movement, or a new timing with something that you've done your whole life in a completely different way. So it can feel paralyzing, but you just have to trust in the process. Yeah.
Hey, that's the name of the show.
Oh, right. There you go.
That's yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Ended there, but I guess I forgot to tell you that part, but that's funny.
Yeah.
So last question for you is, if somebody stops you at your coffee roasting business or on the street and says, "Hey, I heard you on Trust the Process. Really liked what you said. I'm going through something similar right now. What advice do you have for me?" What would you tell them?
I would tell them, hey, that's really hard, first of all, and listen to them, listen to their story, and what they're going through. But I would talk to someone who's been through it. There's a lot of, if you haven't been through it, you won't understand what it feels like or what that person is going through. So I would say seek out someone who's been through it, hopefully that's come through it, and how did they go about that. And it's tricky. There's a lot of, if you just Google it, you'll either end up down a rabbit hole of focal dystonia, or you'll end up paying thousands of dollars for treatment. And it's really tricky. Like, who do you turn to? And I mean, I'm trying not to be biased and plug myself, but I'm in the process of forming this organization called the Embouchure Project, which is a kind of a buffet of, you can come, if you've got a problem, you can come to the Embouchure Project, and we're going to be a team of doctors, neurologists, retraining experts, like professional musicians, teachers. So you have this buffet. Okay, what are your symptoms? What have you got? Like, then you've got all of everything that you would need. That you don't have to scour the internet for. But yeah, so to answer that question, that's what we've been trying to do, is like, who do you call? Yeah, the Ghostbusters. And a joke is because it's really scary. Like, there's not many people in the world that are helping musicians that in this way. So yeah, with it, yeah, it's a tricky question.
Seriously,
yeah,
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because before we started recording, you were telling me that you're actually starting your own podcast. I believe it's Dr. Ackermann too, right? Maybe I'm mistaken about that.
Yeah, so me and Dr. Ackermann run the Brass Rehab, which we've done since I had my injury, pretty much, and we help brass players all around the world. But there's a fantastic guy, Gabe Radford, who's third horn in Toronto Symphony. During COVID, me and Bronwen Ackermann worked with him and got him from not being able to play, really dystonic playing. Like he couldn't play, and we got him back to the orchestra, and he kind of turned around. It's like, right, the world needs to know about this. Like, we're going to do something and do something big. So he's started up this organization, the Embouchure Project, and he's gone around the world and found the best neurologists that he can, psychologists, doctors, academics, retraining experts, and he's forming this organization. And then part of that, he's kind of roped me in to host the podcast. So I've just finished 8 episodes over the year with some of the best neurologists, best doctors in the world, leading research in this area at the moment. And yeah, the things that people are doing and discovering, and the stories have been mind-bending. So so keep an eye out for that.
And that's coming out when?
Hopefully January. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So in a couple of weeks from the time we're recording this, January 2024. So keep an eye out for that. And thank you so much, Frankie, for your time today. I really believe that a lot of people are going to benefit from this, whether they've gone through an injury or not, and the people that they work with as well. And for all you're doing in the community as well, for your helping of rehabbing musicians and things like that. We definitely need more of you out there.
And good luck with your injury.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So to the rest of you listening out there in podcast land, thanks for listening and checking us out, and share this with the people in your life who are going through injury, and the educators in your life who teach them. And until next time, keep trusting the process. Thanks for listening into our conversation today. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. To see a full bio for our guest today, see the show notes or go to our website at trusttheprocesspodcast.com. Make sure you share this with a musician you care about who's going through injury, or a music educator in your life, or anyone just trying to make it in life. If you have a suggestion for a guest or topic to cover, shoot me an email at trustprocesspodcast@gmail.com or send me a message on Facebook or Instagram. Before we go, I just want to give a heartfelt thank you and shout out to my team, Daniel Baldwin, who is my audio engineer, Kevin West, who does all music and sound effects for the show, and my sister Dana Lovell, who created the logo and promotional materials. We wouldn't have this show without them. So tune in next time for another episode of Trust the Process.